All right. Good evening, and welcome to the Select Board meeting for Monday, February 26th, 2024. I am the Chair, Eric Eldridge. The following meeting is being recorded and broadcast by Tyngsborough Media. The meeting is available through our local cable access channels on Comcast and Verizon Fios, and as a live stream on our website, our new website, www.tyngsboroughma.gov. A recording of this meeting will be available through the video on demand portion of our website. Open meeting laws require that any member of the audience who intends on recording either video or audio so declare that now. Seeing none, after instruction from the State Fire Marshal and the Tyngsborough Fire Chief, in the event of an emergency, there is an exit directly across from me at the rear of the room and one to my left. With that, I ask all those who can to rise for the Pledge of Allegiance.
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Thank you. I will start with board introductions from my left.
Good evening, Jacqueline Schnackerts, Executive Assistant.
Good evening, Ron Schneider.
Good evening, Ron Cohane.
Good evening, Katerina Kalabokis.
Good evening, Colin Loisel, Town Manager.
Good evening, Catherine Foster, Assistant Town Manager.
Good evening, David Andrews, Finance Director.
Excellent. Just for those following the agenda, slight change. I know this may come as a shock, but we're going to bump down the town manager's report to happen after the NEMCOG presentation. Other than that, we'll keep everything the same way. With that, can I get a motion on regular session meeting minutes?
I move that the Select Board approve the regular session meeting minutes for February 12, 2024.
Second.
I have a motion and a second. Any further discussion? All those in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Abstained? That carries 4-0-0.
I move that the Select Board approve but not release the executive session meeting minutes for February 12, 2024.
Second.
I have a motion and a second. Any further discussion? All those in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Abstained? Carries 4-0-0. Okay, citizen and business time. I know that we have some folks that are going to come up and speak. Want to remind everybody that please limit your time to 3 minutes. It's a total of 15 minutes. There's a little bit of latitude, but we have a lot of things to cover, so hopefully we can cover everything in there. I know we have some folks that would like to speak, so we'll have the first person come up. You can sit right at the table here at one of the microphones. Please name, address, and then the floor is yours.
Well, my name is part of the thing. You want my address as well?
Sure.
Okay. So, good evening, Select Board. I'm Melinda Theed. I'm the Executive Director of the Tyngsborough Housing Authority. I am not a Tyngsborough resident, so I live in Groton. I come to here to ask for your help. I've been employed with the Housing Authority for 17 years, and I've been the Executive Director for 14 years. Not only do I have years of experience, but I have a perfect performance record with the management reviews from EOHLC, which is formerly known as DHCD. Perfect audit reports, and we are one of the few housing authorities that do not receive subsidy for operating our state budget. On January 31st, 2024, the Housing Authority Board of Commissioners were to do my annual review, vote to approve a salary increase based on the state's calculation, and discuss renewal of my contract. No review took place, a vote to keep the salary the same, and no discussion took place to renew my contract. They went right to voting. Chairman Brian Martin asked if they wanted to renew the contract, and 2 members said no. Our newest board member that you, the Select Board, just appointed to our board to fill a vacant seat, this was his first meeting. And he asked the chairman, how can you do that without doing a review? He got no answer and took a vote of 3-1. Without giving me any opportunity to ask any questions or speak. He went right to passing out information from OHLC to replace me and do a consultant contract for the job search. A tenant who attended the meeting was shocked, got up, and asked if she could ask a question, and was rudely told no. This tenant started a petition in support of me. She got 53 of 92 tenants that signed this petition. I asked the Select Board under Mass General Law, Chapter 121B, Section 6, that you remove the Chairman, Brian Martin, from the Tyngsborough Housing Authority Board of Commissioners for his misconduct of an elected official based on the following. I have, by Mr. Martin, in open meetings, been humiliated, yelled at, harassed, called a liar, disrespected, accused of writing letters that have been mailed to the State Rep Colleen Gary, and signing tenants' names to those letters. Tenants have been disrespected and treated very rudely by Mr. Martin when speaking or asking to speak at a meeting, as they live there, and they have questions about the stuff that affects them, and they've been told that they cannot speak that has nothing to do with them. Since Mr. Martin's coming on the board in 2020, he's made it his personal agenda to get rid of me, and was successful in getting 2 others on his side. I have lost 3 board members in the last 4 years, as they could not stand how Mr. Martin treated them, how he treated me. And there was 1 board member who is very well known in town, who just recently got off the board because she saw his agenda and did not want name put through the mud. My current tenant board member, as well as other tenants, should file elder abuse charges against Mr. Martin for how he treats them. So clearly, he's not on this board for the right reasons. The Board of Commissioners are to support the Executive Director, not fight against. The Executive Director is to protect the Housing Authority from trouble, and if I'm not sure of what I'm being asked to do is proper, I will make calls to the state or to attorneys to get advice. And when Mr. Martin hears this, he gets irate and says, I did not ask you to do that, and here you go again, hiding behind the state. I could have, in the last 4 years, filed numerous open meeting law complaints on Mr. Martin, but I did not, to save the board's embarrassment. But I did tell Mr. Martin that he violated the open meeting law, and again, he challenged me. I know I probably have gone way over my time limit in speaking and could go on all night with more details of why I would like your help in saving my job and removing Mr. Brian Martin from the Tyngsborough Housing Authority Board of Commissioners. If you don't do it for me, please do it for the seniors. Thank you for your time.
Thank you.
Anyone else want to come up?
My name is Yolanda Carmona, and my address is 198 Middlesex Road, Brimley Terrace. I'm here to support Melinda. I have known Melinda for 17 years. I have been living at Brimley 21 years. And in all the years that I've known her, she has been, in my opinion, an excellent director. Since the chairman, Brian Martin, came in, there's been problems, from one problem after another, and it's always been against Melinda. I had an ex-employee come to my apartment to do some work, and he stated, in conversation, I said to him, how is everything going? Because I know that Melinda and him had bad blood. So he proceeded to say to me, next year, Melinda, out. I said, how do you know that? He says, I do. I said, but how? With him, you have to speak because he's deaf, so you have to speak very close. So he said to me, because Brian Martin hates him and wants her out. I said, wow, that's pretty strong. I said, who else hates her on the board? So he said, oh, I said, what about Don? He said, I don't know him. I said, what about John Pelletier? I don't trust him. I said, John, I love John. He says, I don't trust him. He went back and said to me, next year, she's out. And that was that. He repeated that to me 2 more times outside. When I met him outside, he would say the same thing. Next year, she's out. How does this man know that? Because his inclusion with Martin, the two of them know each other. When the vote was taken to relieve him of his duties at Brimley, 3 people voted, Melinda, Don, and John Pelletier. Guess who didn't vote? Martin. He did not vote to get him out. Not that I know much about why the reasons they got him out. I happen to like him very much. He was always very nice with me, this maintenance man. But I believe that the 2 of them colluded to get Melinda out. The reason, I don't know. I'll put my lawyer's hat on, make-believe lawyer hat on, and I suppose that Mr. Martin must have promised this ex-employee that if we get Melinda out, we'll bring you back. Again, that's just something that I'm,
You don't have to speculate.
okay. But anyhow, and I believe that also at meetings, Mr. Martin does not allow people to speak. If it's something that he doesn't want to hear, he will not allow you to speak. That board is for us tenants. We should be able to speak. Our input is valuable. Everybody should be heard and included in the conversation. Also, I believe that Melinda's rights were violated in the sense we should have been aware that her contract was not going to be renewed. No one should have known that until it was done. Everybody knew this way ahead of time. I wrote a letter to Colleen Gary, Lori Trahan, the senator. I even spoke to the senator one day that he came here to take some photos. I spoke to him about the letter. I've never heard anything. I have a copy of the letter if you gentlemen want the copy. I never heard from anyone. And I believe that it's an injustice what they have done to Melinda. She does not deserve this. And we tenants are supporting her, and we will stick with her till the end. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Good evening. My name is Donna Torville. I live at Brinley Terrace. I attended the January 31st, 2024 Tyngsborough Housing Authority Board meeting at Brinley Terrace. I was disturbed and appalled at the way this meeting was overseen by Chairperson Brian Martin. I ended up filing an open meeting law complaint on February 6, 2024, as it appeared to me that a decision had been reached outside of and prior to the meeting not to renew Executive Director Melinda Theed's contract. Mr. Martin, Mr. Lampron, and Mr. Pelletier quickly voted not to renew without a review of her evaluations, without any discussion amongst themselves, and with no opportunity for Ms. Theed to address any legitimate concerns they may have had. I thought this was shoddy treatment for someone who has been employed by the Tyngsborough Housing Authority for the past 17 years. At the February 8th, 2024 Town Hall meeting, which was held to discuss a search for a new executive director with a consultant in attendance, a Brinley Terrace tenant asked if we could know the reason why Ms. Theed's contract was not renewed. Mr. Martin said, no, it's personal. If his response meant no due to confidentiality, of course, we understand and respect that. I wonder perhaps if it's actually a Freudian slip and Mr. Martin's decision to rush a quick vote at the January 31st meeting was actually due to his own personal reasons and not in response to Ms. Theed's actual job performance at all. While talking with many residents of Brinley Terrace in Red Pines, acquiring signatures for the petition, it was apparent that many tenants believed Mr. Martin's interactions with Executive Director Melinda Theed were demeaning, as he often displayed a disrespectful attitude towards her. Several residents commented they had known for some months back since June at least of 2023 that Ms. Theed would not be rehired and that he wanted her out. If so, this is a very unsettling and completely inappropriate that tenants would have knowledge of Executive Director Melinda Theed's contract outcome prior to the January 31st, 2024 meeting. Thank you.
Thank you. So I think at this point, I appreciate everybody coming in. Oh, did you want to come up and speak? One more.
Hi. Good evening.
Good evening.
My name's Karen Mealy Kalhauser, and I live at Brindley Terrace. I've only been there since June of '23. I just want to say that I was at that meeting that they were talking about with Mr. Martin, and I found him to be very arrogant, very rude. It was awful, awful, awful. I'll be honest, I got up and walked out. It was the most unprofessional meeting I have ever been to. And I've been to a lot of them. I work for the government, the state. And I just want to say that Melinda is doing a great job. I mean, with all the work that she does, keeping up with all of us, Brindley Terrace and Red Pines, she's got a lot on her plate. But if you ask her a question, she'll give you an answer. And if she doesn't have it right away, she will get back to you. But to take her out because of a personal matter with Mr. Martin is just unfair. And I don't feel that Mr. Martin should be anywhere near any of this predicament because it is a personal thing with him. But that's all.
Thank you.
I'm sorry. Thank you.
Well, I appreciate folks bringing this to us. We'll have to take a look, at the, we already have counsel looking at the statute and what our options are and find out a little bit more on that. So we can't do anything today. This is the first time we're hearing of these items. I appreciate you bringing this to us. We will follow up and try to get down to the details and see what would be an appropriate action for this. So thank you all for coming. Is there anything? Good. Anybody have any other citizens' topics that they wanted to speak about? Excellent. All right, well, thank you. I appreciate you coming in and stepping forward and speaking from your heart. So I guess with that, we'll go to the NEMCOG presentation. Are you kicking this off, or?
I will just briefly introduce.
You know, you can, yeah, make yourself comfortable, have a seat.
For those that haven't had the chance to meet her, this is Jenny. She's the executive director of NIMCOG. Tyngsborough is a member of NIMCOG. Ron serves as our representative, and we've worked with NIMCOG on quite a bit of projects. So Jenny's here to talk a little bit about what we're working with them on and all the great work that they're doing as well. So I'll turn it over to Jenny.
Great, thank you. And do you want me to keep going now?
Sure.
Okay. So again, thank you for having me. Good evening to all select board members and staff. Appreciate you making time on your very busy agenda, I'm sure, to listen to me talk about the Regional Planning Agency and the work that we've been doing with Tyngsborough. Just to give you a little preview, and for those who may not be familiar with us, we are the Regional Planning Agency. We're based in Lowell. We serve Greater Lowell. It is 9 communities. We're one of 13 regional planning agencies across the Commonwealth. We have been in business since 1963, so we're actually in our, coming into our 60th year here, and have been providing services that range from land use planning, housing, economic development, transportation, environment, climate, resiliency, environmental protection, open space and recreation planning. Pretty much runs the gamut across all of the different types of planning capacities that you can imagine locally. We do those locally as part of our direct professional technical assistance, And then we also do regional level planning, so looking at comprehensively what do these different topical areas mean at a regional level. We also work to coordinate beyond our region with other adjacent regional planning agencies and even into New Hampshire, where they also have regional planning agencies. So there's a lot of regional and state level and even federal coordination on the various programs that we run. We also do a bunch of regional coordination activities, including working with the city and town managers and administrators in a CEO coordinating group where we meet monthly and look to other types of opportunities to work together, on a variety of different levels. One of those levels is still weights and measures, so we are still your sealer of weights and measures, but we are looking at other opportunities to regionalize and find ways to work cooperatively. So that's just a little preview of things. Also, as you know, one of your select board members is always annually appointed to represent the town as part of our council. We meet monthly it's actually a hybrid meeting, usually the third Wednesday night of the month, so anybody is technically welcome to attend. Also, a planning board representative is also part of our council, and then we have an alternate. This changes annually after your annual town election, so when that happens, usually right after, I get in touch with your town administrator or manager and work through the process of getting people reappointed. We also have 15 staff, and the staff range from administrative staff to technical staff, and then of course a lot of planning staff. We're able to provide basically any services that you're looking for and have in fact helped with a range of different mediating or negotiating, looking into and exploring different grant opportunities, helping with various types of research or analyses and studies. So for example, on the research and analysis side, we've helped with transportation and traffic studies, traffic counting that you might need to do as part of projects that you're looking to advance. We also continue to monitor the park and ride facility that's here in town, and also just engage generally in long-range planning that helps to benefit the town of Tyngsborough. You pay an annual assessment to participate in these activities, which in the past year was about $4,300, and this is something that we bill you annually, usually at the beginning of the fiscal year. Additionally, this particular year, we've been assisting you pretty, I think, regularly and working directly with your town planner, Eric Salerno, on compliance with Massachusetts General Law, Chapter 40A, Section 3A, which is also known as the MBTA Communities Act. And of course, eventually you will likely be even more engaged in those conversations, but for now I'll leave you with, we are working with the town to help you achieve compliance. Additionally, we help to keep you also maintaining your green community status, which you've had for a number of years. And we do that by helping you with your annual reporting and also provide you with resources, technical and otherwise, to help make sure that you're achieving your compliance with green community status. Also, we help to make sure that you're in compliance with stormwater rules and regulations by helping with a participatory process that we organize through the Northern Middlesex Stormwater Collaborative. It's a group that meets quarterly, and then we also share resources on a regular basis to keep you compliant with that. Last thing is near map imagery. We provide you with a subscription for the town, which helps to make sure that you have lots of mapping and GIS data readily available to you so that you can, I'm sure, keep up to date on a number of different things that you do using that technology. Currently, we just awarded the town additional technical assistance to help you to update your housing production plan. This is a plan that is a 5-year document that helps to outline where you want to go in terms of housing production and also preservation. And then additionally, there's a lot of regional level projects that you participate in. A couple of them that I'll point out include a regional digital equity process that we're working on, which is basically working with a variety of town officials, I believe, and others in the community on helping people to have digital access. So that could be anything from accessing a meeting like this, making sure that they have the tools and resources, but also know how to use the technology, so providing additional follow-up and training. So it's not broadband installation or other sort of infrastructure necessarily, but it could eventually lead to funding like that. And then also we are working on a Greater Lowell Vision Zero plan, which is to help all of our communities make sure that we do not have crashes that result in fatal injuries or death, and part of that process is making sure that all of our communities understand where they stand in a high injury network across the region, and providing them with the tools that they might need in order to address those issues locally. And then also potentially applying for additional funding to address really intersections of great concern where there have been high death rates or other severe injuries. So those are a number of things that we are working on, and a couple of the things to come in the future. And we're very excited to be able to continue working with you. Obviously, we have a long-standing relationship. This was actually the first community that I visited when I first started in my position in July of 2022, and I'm just so enthusiastic about the opportunity to continue the dialogue and the discussion with all of you tonight. Happy to answer any questions. Thank you.
Thank you. Great. I guess I will open up to the board, given that you're a representative.
Yes.
I'll let you kick it off.
Well, when I was running for my first term as selectman, Rich Lemoyne told me I should talk to NIMCOG Beverly Woods. So I had a long conversation with Beverly. She convinced me that we had an opportunity to get a lot more grants than we were getting. And I talked to Matt Hansen, and I used to sit next to him after the select board meetings over some beers, and I'd always talk to him about grants. And I was convinced, by talking to both of them, that we could get a lot more grants. And we have received a lot more grants. But that's how I got involved in NIMCOG. This is my 7th year on NIMCOG. And they've helped us with many things beyond the grants also. Like all the long-term planning she talks about, I think NIMCOG's funded every one of those, or at least a portion of it, and I think all of it. And it comes $30,000, $40,000 every one. But every plan, long-term plan that we get, that helps us get more grants, because the state wants to know that you have a plan moving forward and you're meeting that particular plan. So they've been very helpful to this community, helped us get a lot more grants. I just talked about the green community, which we received just under $1 million in green community grants. That helped us reduce our electrical bill by over 20%. We received an award for that. And for 2 years, I was on the master plan committee, and we finished our master plan, which we have finished, and now we have a committee to make sure that we keep working on that particular document. And Jenny's come in, and she's been great to work with. Came in with a different perspective, very open, wants to get everybody together, come together with plans with all the board members, all the communities, and it's been a pleasure working with you. I don't have any questions, or I would have asked you already, but thank you very much, and you're doing a great job.
Thank you. You're welcome, of course.
Thank you. Mr. Schneider?
I also have no questions. Thank you for coming in front of us today.
You're welcome.
I don't have any questions. I have some comments, just more to add on to what you're talking about. So one, I am knee-deep in the MBTA communities and have been, and the folks at NIMCOG have been excellent in helping us to not only look at different options, but to help visualize those and to help residents visualize those, so they can kind of see what some of the impacts might be. I would also call, so if you look at our goals for this year, there was a bunch of items that you touched upon. One is grants, right, helping us with those. We talked about the MBTA, housing production plan, which we just got a grant. That was one of our items to say, okay, we're at the tail end of that. It's an item that is a problem in all communities, and we're no exception. So I appreciate to have a partner to work with on this. I was looking at the numbers, and I thought there was a typo, that our fee, our contribution is $4,300 a year. I thought there's something, that can't be right, but it is correct. So I look at it, and that's got to be the best $4,300 that we spent, just because of all the things that we have. I think that there's other things we'd like to take a look at, maybe around benchmarking and seeing where we are with long-term planning, and just seeing, spending, and as we get into different fiscal situations to figure out where we are. The board has changed our driving force has been less, we're trying to get out of the day-to-day and deal with more of the strategic planning, and that's where NEMCOG is really a big help to us. So I think it's been a great partnership. I think it'll continue to be a great partnership. And like I said, I was sitting there and saying, that can't be right, the numbers, but it is. So I appreciate all that you do. I think it's great. We need to figure out, I always look at it and say, all right, even when we have something that's good, I say, can we take even more advantage of it? It's one of those things to constantly, I think that there are opportunities for us on that. So no questions, but commentary on that. Colin, I didn't know if there were any other things that you wanted to make sure. Do we want to dovetail into the
Yes.
that other item?
Absolutely. I can
While
pull
we're
it-
here?
I can pull that up for you.
Oh, good. You put it in the packet. Great.
Yes.
Yeah.
So this was included in your packet. This is a draft letter of support for the Affordable Homes Act, and Jenny can certainly give a much better summary of what that would do, but this is something you don't necessarily need to decide tonight. If you think that you're comfortable, that'd be great, but while we have the expert here, I figured it would make sense to have her walk us through it.
Yes.
Yes, certainly. And I will say that this is targeted mostly towards the local option real estate transfer fee. So it could be, it's more specific just to that, but the draft letter makes it seem like you're supporting the entire Affordable Homes Act. I'm not here to talk with you about the entire Affordable Homes Act. I'm glad to. It is basically it's a housing bond bill, which is something that is issued every 4 years. And it includes, a pretty significant number, like $4.2 billion potentially of funding that will go towards all different types of state housing programs. There's also policy that's baked into the bill, as well as commissions. I'm on one of those commissions, actually, the Unlocking Housing Production Commission. And there's a number of other things that are part of the bond bill. One of them is this local option transfer fee. And the state is trying to get a sense of how many communities are interested in this or would be interested in this. It's completely optional. You don't have to, if you agreed to sign a letter of support, you'd simply be saying, we agree that communities should have the option to go through a local, legislative and, ballot sort of exercise, if you will, to adopt a local real estate transfer fee. That is something that is completely separate from this process. All this does is entitle each community across the Commonwealth potentially to have that option. Right now, you're not allowed to do that. And so what has happened is that a number of municipalities across the Commonwealth have filed home rule petitions to do just this. And so instead of going through all of these mini petitions, the state says, well, maybe we should think about a way to just have this local option come about through this bonding process. So that's basically what this is right now. And essentially it would be somewhere, it's also something that can be locally designed. So there's not a prescriptive route for each community to follow or some sort of template. It would be somewhere between 0.5 to 2% of a transactional type of fee. It could be buyer and seller or just buyer or just seller, where the fee is basically imposed. And it's completely transactional. It's only when there's something happening at the registry, and that's when that fee becomes available. Why is there a fee that's being talked about? Because that's the way that you generate funds for local development and creation or preservation of affordable housing. You just had a conversation, very different topically, but about the local housing authority, and that's an example of where you could potentially allocate additional funding if you were interested, through also your local affordable housing trust, which you just set up in 2021 or something like that, very recently. And so if you're looking to fund things like your affordable housing trust or provide funds directly to help support affordable housing in your community, a local fee would be another way of getting at that. Of course, you have CPA. I know that you have other types of mechanisms already in place. That's excellent. But the cost of developing or preserving affordable housing is much further beyond that number. So again, this is just a local option, and that is essentially what this letter of support is about. However, if you wanted to also support the Affordable Homes Act, which is a much bigger and a voluminous type of thing, you could look through that and find other things that you might want to support out of the Affordable Homes Act as well. This, however, is asking officials to sign on to this letter, perhaps tailoring it on your own. It is due right now by March 15th, but it'll be an iterative letter process because they're going to change it every time it goes to a new committee and is heard at different committees. So there will probably be at least 2, maybe 3 more opportunities to sign on in the future, should you wish to do so at a different time. But that is the current timing of this particular opportunity. I'm glad to answer questions.
I'll open it up to questions on that one. Did you want to,
Nothing for me.
Mr. Schneider?
No, I read it. It appears that the local community could levy a whatever percent more or less they wanted, right, on those transactions? I know it said somewhere between 1/2 and 2.
Yes. That's generally the recommended range, that is being there, and that's being somewhat designed as part of this. So it's noted in here that as part of this process, they're planning to provide some guidelines and guidance that would come from this.
And that money stays within the local community?
Stays within the local community,
That's important, yeah.
Yeah, it's completely about whatever Tyngsborough would want in the future, if it's about
Right.
Tyngsborough.
So just to confirm, we would just be voting that this is something that we would like to look into and we could possibly support, not necessarily that we have done a thorough investigation and we support it currently at this time, correct?
That, but even like a step before that, which is you're just saying you believe that it's a good idea for municipalities across the Commonwealth to even have the option to consider this. So it's like the step even before considering whether or not it makes sense for Tyngsborough to do this. Just even enabling it, it's an enabling legislation, so that it would give communities the ability to do this independently rather than through a home rule petition process. Speaking directly, I also have drafted these real estate transfer fee proposals for, in part with Brookline and then in the town of Arlington. So I'm glad to answer questions more specifically about the types of requirements that might be put forward.
And can I just ask, the fee, it says the fee is on high-end real estate transactions. Do you know what qualifies as high-end real estate transactions?
So it's again, it would be tailored to your community. And that's part of the guidelines that haven't been developed yet. At this point, basically they're saying that probably over like $1 million. There's already a millionaire's tax that's happened, as a result of last year's passage of that law. So it's not necessarily $1 million. It might be whatever is relevant at the higher end in Tyngsborough. The same thing might go for another area of the state. So they tried not to, there had actually been more prescriptive language in an original version of this, but due to the fact that there are so many different markets across the Commonwealth, they felt that it made more sense to leave out a specific number and rather have that be put forth through guidance to municipalities afterwards.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
And just to further clarify, so all we're saying in this letter is that the town, the municipality, should have ultimate control, that the state should not be imposing these things, that the town, and it's not us, the town, it would be town meeting, would have to vote, and that's where we would set thresholds that are appropriate.
Correct.
For, and that's, again, based on the recommendation is that it would be a local item to set that threshold, because $1 million threshold in Boston is very different than it is in Tyngsborough, for example. And that, the key here is that we would maintain the percentage, the threshold, and that the town controls that versus it being dictated. And this letter is essentially saying, we know that you're considering legislation. These items need to be maintained under the control of the municipality versus the state.
Yes, correct in many ways. I would just add that it's just, you want to be able to give communities the local, even just have the option to consider such a type of additional fee process through local real estate transactions. Right now, you don't have the authority to do that exactly. So you're looking to have the option to have that authority.
I'm sorry.
That came up a follow-up question, right?
Yes, can I just clarify one step further? So if this power does not lie within the local community, are we saying that this is something right now that the state does have the power to impose and does impose? Or if we decide not to do this, it's just not going to be a tax?
There's currently no discussion of the state doing that.
Okay.
The only thing that the state is talking about doing is creating a local option transfer fee. And each local community would have to go through its own process locally, legislatively, in your case, town meeting, of course, would be the body that decides such a thing. That is how it would work. Right now, you can't do that, and the state is not talking about imposing such a fee on communities across the Commonwealth. Or not in the community, but on transactions in the Commonwealth.
And this was started because there were like, I understand there's like 17
Yes.
communities who've started to go down this road or have already gone down this road. And it just makes it easier for the rest of the 370 or so communities to not have to go through that mechanism in order to do that, given that local affordable housing is a challenge across the Commonwealth.
Correct.
Other questions? I mean, I certainly, we're making no commitment, and I think the ask of the legislators to consider the local option is kind of a critical piece. I mean, ultimately, that's what we want all the time, is to let this community decide what's appropriate for this community. So, I mean, personally, I have no problem endorsing this and voting to endorse this now, but I wanted to see what other people.
Well, I wasn't expecting to vote on this tonight, and I would like to do a little bit more research on this, but, you know, that's my opinion.
When is our next meeting?
March 11th.
And these have to be out by the 15th in this particular round?
Mm-hmm. Yes.
So how about I know you're not going to be here for that.
Correct.
Are you okay with, if we decided to vote on it on the 11th?
Absolutely.
Yeah. I'm fine waiting till the 11th as well. I mean, I personally, would like to see a little bit more of the complete act, but, like I said, I felt comfortable with it, so, what are your thoughts?
I don't know that I would feel comfortable with it today.
Mhm.
I just have a few questions that I'd like to get answered and have the opportunity to think about a little bit more. I personally, sometimes to a fault, appreciate detail, and I understand why it might be a negative here. I'm just thinking about who exactly gets to decide what high-end real estate looks like. And in a market where already buying a home is so expensive, I understand that this is a higher-end home, but today, a $1 million home is not something that is unheard of. It's not necessarily what, the high-end can be defined in many different ways. And I think I would just have to think for myself personally a little bit about, who within town would make these regulations? How would those be policed? How would we then determine what the definitions are? I guess there's a lot of just questions in my mind that I'd have to go over. I have no problem doing it at the March 11th meeting. I just think personally I'd have to sit with this a little bit more.
Yep, and I can just quickly, if it's okay. The select board would be the determining body for those types of items. So you would basically, similar to the way that you handle other votes that ultimately go to town meeting, you would be, ruling over such decision. That is what you would be recommending to town meeting when they take their vote eventually, and that is what would move forward. So similar to CPA, the same exact process. You would decide, you had sort of a menu of options with CPA, there would probably be a similar thing here, and probably also things that would help to guide you in thinking about the appropriate, numbers and thresholds and all of the other data points that need to be plugged in here. That is sort of in the future to come, but that would be used as a guide to help you. So,
Thank you very much.
You're
So
welcome.
let's put this on for March 11th. We'll do a little bit more homework on this, make everybody feel comfortable, and we'll discuss that then.
Thank you so much.
Okay, you're welcome. Absolutely.
Again, thank you for coming in, appreciate it.
Absolutely. Thanks for having me. Have a good night.
Thank you, you too.
Okay. All right, Colin, you ready to jump in and give us your report?
Absolutely. To start, Jenny mentioned that we were awarded the DLTA award. She didn't mention that it was $30,000, which is a substantial some. And the benefit, of course, is that NIMCOG has helped us with our first housing production plan, and so they're very familiar with the challenges we face in Tyngsborough and with that plan. So if we had to hire a consultant outside of NIMCOG for this work, it certainly would be much more than $30,000. So that's a big win for the town. Just a reminder that early voting for the March 5th presidential primary is currently happening. Voters can vote early here at Town Hall tomorrow from 8:30 a.m. to 4:30 p.m., Wednesday 8:30 a.m. to 7 p.m., and Thursday from 8:30 to 4 p.m. Last week, I met with staff from Representative Trahan's office to talk about priorities for Tyngsborough. We emphasized the need for infrastructure funding, specifically around roads, and the need for federal funding to help spur a larger state investment in public facilities in a similar way that the state currently funds public school projects. On the DPW, the new DPW pre-engineered steel building, we received one response on the design contract. It came from Soco Tech, which has done probably 5 or 6 contracts in Tyngsborough in the last 10 years, including the First Parish, the Old Town Hall, and they're currently working on the Winslow School. We just began the fee negotiation phase, so I expect that in the next week or so, we'll have a contract in place. It's a pre-engineered building, so the design part won't take a heck of a bit long. So that project will move along nicely. On March 5th, I'll attend the Finance Committee meeting with David and Kat to present our fiscal '25 budget. The same stuff that you've seen up until today and a presentation that we'll give a little bit later, just to make sure that they're on the same page. And it's at that same meeting that we'll present the proposed capital plan for fiscal '25. We are currently in our last year of the contract for trash hauling with Republic Services. Earlier this year, we signed a new 5-year contract with Covanta, which is the waste receiver. Republic takes our trash to Covanta and they dispose of it. In order to ensure that we're receiving a competitive rate from Republic, we are meeting tomorrow with E.L. Harvey, which is another big competitor in our area. They just picked up a contract in Westford, so they are trying to plant their roots here in Tyngsborough. Last year, we looked into this. The cost savings weren't enough to justify a move, but given their large investment in their fleet to service Westford, and the fact that we no longer have the 1-year extension option with Republic, we'd have to commit to a 5-year. It's in our best interest to just make sure that we're getting competitive rates. So at the next board meeting, depending on how it goes, I'll ask for some guidance, probably an executive session. Today we received a copy of our annual report from Freedom Energy. They're the company that handles the municipal accounts for energy aggregation. So we have one account for residential aggregation. If we added our municipal accounts because of the usage, it would have driven up the price that residents are paying. So instead, we shopped separately for that. However, even with our separate shopping, we saved $21,000 last year in electricity just in town buildings. And as you'll remember, a couple of months ago now, we signed a contract for a similar program for gas supply. So I expect that next year when we get our annual report, it'll be at least double, if not higher than that $21,000. Tyngsborough Media has launched a new podcast series entitled Tyngsborough Vibes, which is intended to be a fun way to get to know town officials by highlighting their music playlists, so some of you may be contacted. Their first series launched last week. It was my fantastic playlist. You can listen to it on Spotify, Apple Music, and iHeart. And there's also now a link on the town's new website for all of the podcasts that they're putting together, which really is designed to take the content that people can see on a computer and make it more accessible. So if you have a commute to work, if you're on the train, if you're traveling, you can listen to all things Tyngsborough because we know that's what people want, obviously. On Friday, I will attend the MMA's legislative breakfast in North Andover to talk to legislative leaders about municipal legislative priorities, including many of the local reforms, including Governor Healy's Municipal Empowerment Act, amongst including new revenue options for the town that also dealt with extensions on some of the COVID era, we keep calling it, accommodations around outdoor dining, making temporary modifications permanent, making remote meetings permanent, all the like. I do want to take a minute to just acknowledge Jackie's hard work. Eric had a chance to see what is almost the finished product on the annual town report. We've received all of our board, committee, and department reports, and Jackie's now, I think, on version 2 of the nearly complete product, which really, again, I've talked about this before, but the more I look at the finished product, takes all of the information that I think people want to see in the annual report and highlights it. In the past, our annual report was great, but the information was buried. It was in paragraph form. There were no pictures. This will encourage people to look at it, and you'll be able to very quickly identify what are you trying to tell me and what is the message. So Jackie's worked very hard on it. It's been a painstaking process because she's got it perfected, and so people just send her the stuff and she formats it, but it looks fantastic. We're gonna have limited copies available just in an effort to be sustainable, but of course, we'll have it available electronically, and upon request, we'll provide additional copies. And then I just wanted to note that earlier today, I received the quarterly update from the Tyngsborough Public Library. I've added it to your packet if you wanted to look at it. This quarter, they held 43 programs, which saw a total of 806 people in attendance, circulated 20,000 items, and saw over 10,000 patrons through the front doors. They've done a great job of expanding the program offerings, and so you might have noticed they ventured out to hosting a lot of them at the Old Town Hall. So it gives them more room to host events, and it's also utilizing one of our public buildings much more, so kudos to them. That's all I've got.
Excellent. So, Kat, why don't we go to yours, and then we'll open up to the board for questions, comments.
That's good. I only have a few things. Invitation for bids were released for the 2024 Road Improvement Project Phase 1 on Wednesday, February 21st. Bids for this project are due March 13th. And then lastly, we received one proposal for the economic development brochures, request for proposals. This response came from the designers, a graphic design company located here in Tyngsborough.
Excellent. Thank you. All right. I will open it up to the board. Questions, comments on the updates?
None for me.
On here.
Just to echo what Colin said, I have seen the annual report, and it looks fantastic. Jackie has done a tremendous job on it. Her attention to detail and just getting to like the important stuff, right? There's a lot of information that's there, and I think people are gonna like the new format where, you know, at the bottom in blue, there's some key numbers that people, there's just a lot of stuff, and how do you boil down, I don't know how many pages this one's gonna end up being, but I went through the one from last year, and it's this big, thick piece of paper, and it's like, all right, just give it to me in the important stuff, and it's much more easily digested. So, great job, Jackie. I think people are gonna be happy. So, I know they'll be happy. It is fantastic looking, and I appreciate all your efforts so far, because it has been a lot. I was shocked at how much was there.
She'll have a table at town meeting signing them.
That would be fantastic.
Can I just
make
say
it
that
happen.
Please.
this was really an effort that the department heads and groups really did a great job getting this information to me quickly and timely, and helping with pictures and helping. So really, thank you for the kudos, but this is really the effort of everybody else who put the reports together.
Yeah, it doesn't take a village, it takes a town, right? And, but getting all those people coordinated in a relatively short period of time, I know there was a couple things where I was like, you sent a reminder, and, I gotta get on this. So I appreciate that, and everybody else for pulling together the information. That's it, that's all I got for that one. I think we can jump into new business. All right. ARPA request, building facilities assessment for police and fire. Is that you?
It is.
All right, take it away.
All right, included in your packet this evening is a proposal from LaValle Brensinger Architects for a comprehensive assessment of the building condition for the police station at 20 Westford Road and the fire department central station on Kendall Road. On top of that scope of work, it also includes a feasibility assessment as to whether or not the existing fire department site on Kendall Road could potentially accommodate an addition to the building at some point in the future. This is the same firm that did a comprehensive building assessment back in 2015. That assessment included just the town hall, the highway garage, and our 4 school buildings. I think in reading back some of the correspondence, we were still talking about a potential public safety building in 2015, so they didn't include it at the time. What that report did do, however, particularly here at the town hall and library, is it really just gave us a very comprehensive 5- and 10-year capital plan, and that has quite literally become the basis for every request we've submitted to capital. It includes cost estimates, obviously those change over time, but it gave us a really good idea of what actually needs to be done instead of us just looking at the building and saying, hey, I think this is a good idea. As the board will remember, we implemented a public safety building study committee last year, which concluded with an assessment that at this current moment, it's probably not financially feasible for the town to embark on building a new combined public safety building. So in the meantime, we now have to deal with the fact that we need to start making some serious capital investments in the two buildings that we are currently occupying, and at the very least will occupy for the next 5 to 8 years, probably more. And what we've always done on capital is ask department heads, many of whom are not building experts or construction specialists, to tell us what their needs are. And so we don't always get the most bang for our buck and really the most, the industry standard as it comes to capital assets. So what we would like to do is utilize ARPA funding to the tune of $82,000 to bring this firm in, which will do a complete top to bottom assessment. It'll be structural, it'll be mechanical, they'll look at electrical and plumbing, and the cosmetic things which we can see. And they'll tell us not just what needs to be done, when it should be done, how long those repairs will last. They'll provide an order of magnitude, and they'll also do construction cost estimates. And that will allow us to, for next year's capital, give a more precise request and really start to preserve these buildings for as long as we're going to continue to use them. The very minor piece of the project that involves assessing the current Kendall Road Fire Station site is because one of the things that has come up time and time again is the fire station is obviously undersized. If we can't afford a new combined building or a new fire station in the next 5 to 10 years, is it feasible to, in the short term, build an addition on the site? Looking at it, it's a tough site for sure, but this will give us an idea of very high level, could you actually make it work? It wouldn't give us a plan to build it. It wouldn't give us anything beyond that. This request, because we are seeking to use ARPA funds and because eventually it will tie into capital requests, was presented to the Capital Asset Management Committee, who voted at their last meeting unanimously to recommend its funding.
So, let's see, couple things. One, we've talked about this. I've been pushing for this. The reality is, if you look at both our public safety buildings, police and fire, they've been neglected. We've tried to spend money on things that needed to be done, but it hasn't been as coordinated. And really what we need is a plan for the next 5, 8, 10 years, whatever it is. I don't want to give up on trying to find a way to get new public safety, but in the meantime, we really need to make sure that we're thoughtful in how we're spending our money and keeping these buildings up and running, because it does impact the safety of those folks that are there. You know, I worry about in the fire station where their workout room is, right where the trucks are, and they've got the exhaust and all the things, where they sleep. You know, I look at the things at the police station, and if we can come up, I don't like spending money. I was sitting there telling Colin, I said, I don't like the number. I wish it was a lot lower to do an assessment, but that is what assessments go for, and I think it will pay for itself over the next several years because we'll be focusing in on the right things, and we'll also know what's possible. That's really the biggest challenge. We don't know what's possible, you know, in some of those locations to say, well, you know, you could think about this, you could do something here. I think what we did at the highway, the garage there, and putting something there, that wasn't really on our radar before, and it came up as an idea, and that was a great idea, and I think that we're gonna have those types of things. As Colin said, we did talk about it at capital asset, because while it's not a capital item, it impacts capital, so we just wanted to make sure that we did talk about that, and we all agreed that that was there. So let me just frame that with additional info there, and I'll open it up to the board for
So, Mr. Chair, I got one
Sure.
question for
Sure.
Colin. So, yeah, so the price always shocks all of us, right?
Mhm.
So I look at it and go, ugh, you know, $82,000 is a lot of money. Reading through the proposal, the one question I do have for Colin, and then I'll make other comments. When we had a combined public safety building committee, they met with the police chief and the fire chief, and they talked about their needs. And I did recognize in the proposal that we're presenting tonight, they also talked about the police and fire needs. Did they receive that document so they at least have a starting point on what the needs are from the fire and the police?
Yes, and this will be, they do have that. They will still talk to them. It will be from a different angle. When we had the firm come in to do the needs assessment, it was in designing a new building.
Right.
they'll use the document that we currently have and update interviews to make recommendations about using their existing space. So it represents a very small portion of the work, but they do have all of the historical information, and it will just advise, on top of other things, which parts of the building are most important, what are some challenges people in the fire department living there during their shifts have to deal with. So yeah, they have all that, and it could potentially, they'll update it, so if in 5 years or so, we're looking at potentially needing a new building, they'll.
Okay, thank you. Just wanted to make sure they had that, so they had a good starting point, so we weren't being charged for that again. But, and I do realize that there's more to be added. I mean, because one of the key things when I really look at this, especially from the fire station, is like, you know, I look at the fire, you know, the current fire station, and it's hard to imagine how they could add on to that, you know, too much. And it's in such tough shape, it's hard to imagine. But having somebody actually do an assessment on that would be very valuable to us, I think. And the other thing for both buildings, you know, if they look at the repairs and everything, and it's, you know, 75% of a new building, that kind of tells us which way we should go. And right now, we kind of are guessing a little bit. Everybody has different ideas, but nobody's really done a thorough assessment of that. And it was always weird that, you know, we did an assessment of all these buildings, but it was never the police and fire. I never really quite understood that. I don't know if I was part of that decision-making process or not. It was too long ago, but it always did seem like that was a hole that we needed to fill at some point. And so I'm really glad this was done. I'm glad the Capital Asset Committee approved this. Thank you.
Anything further, Mr.
No, I mean, I echo with what Mr. Cohane says, you know, for the need to do this, and I think this would be a valuable tool to us. We discussed it at the capital asset planning meetings. This is a draft. I would ask that we go back and really clean up this draft, since it still refers to Concord, New Hampshire, and addresses in Concord, New Hampshire, and it needs to be cleaned up, right? But that aside, and that's just a minor point, I'm fully in support of this. I think this is overdue, and it's going to be a valuable tool for us.
I concur, and I think it makes sense just the same way that we're doing with the roads, right? Figuring out what the plan is, making an assessment, having the professionals come in so that we don't have to get reports from every which way and determining, you know, what's legitimate and what isn't, right? It makes sense, so I agree.
The only question I did have, contract is 82 plus 2,000 in reimbursable expenses. Do we need to authorize 84 or 82?
82.
Okay.
It's up to 2,000.
Just
and-
negotiate
yeah.
that, negotiate 2,000 out of it and.
Deal. Absolutely. And we'll put this in our standard contract. We don't
Yes.
sign vendors' proposals.
Yeah, so I don't have any further questions, and I am in favor of this, so. I will entertain a motion.
I move that the select board authorize $82,000 in ARPA funds for a building assessment for the police department and fire department as outlined above.
Second.
I have a motion and a second. Any further discussion? All those in favor? Aye. Opposed? Abstained? That carries 4-0-0. Planning Board alternate member appointment. Who has that? Oh, Jackie.
So we have received a request from the planning board to appoint Mr. Michael Page as an alternate member of the Tyngsborough Planning Board. This opening has been advertised on tyngsboroughma.gov for some time now. A copy of Mr. Page's letter of interest, along with an endorsement from the planning board, are included in your packets this evening. Town planner, economic developer director Eric Salerno has met with Mr. Page and feels he would be a great addition to the board. Additionally, the planning board met on Thursday, February 15th, and recommended this appointment. Mr. Page has a background in construction and real estate, including involvement with the Merrimack Commons and Tyngsborough Crossing projects. He has been a Tyngsborough resident since 2020. Upon appointment of Mr. Page this evening, he would serve for a three-year term effective immediately through June 30th, 2027.
Thank you. Further discussions? Any questions? I will entertain a motion.
I move that the select board appoint Michael Page as an alternate member of the planning board effective immediately through June 30th, 2027.
Second.
I have a motion and a second. Any further discussion? All those in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Abstained? That carries 4-0-0. Academy of Notre Dame one-day liquor license request.
Included in your packet this evening is an application from the Academy of Notre Dame via Julie Clark, requesting a one-day liquor license for their trivia night, which is their annual event, to be held on Saturday, March 16th, 2024, from 6:30 to 9. Similar to last year's event, the Academy of Notre Dame plans to sell alcohol to be drunk on the premises for guests over age 21 years. The event will be held on the premises in the Blanche Walsh Gym, and approximately 100 guests are expected. We have spoken to Ms. Clark and confirmed that all servers will be tip certified and all alcohol will be consumed within the Blanche Walsh Sports Center. We asked relevant departments for comments, and there were no adverse comments. The Board of Health did ask if they were going to have catering, that they would will apply for the licenses they need. Ms. Clark has confirmed that there will be no food served. They will be brought in from the participants. So they're all set there.
Excellent. Questions from the board? This is a pretty standard item.
Very standard.
I will entertain a motion.
I move that the Select Board approve the application for a one-day liquor license for the Academy of Notre Dame Academy for a trivia night to be held in the Blanche Walsh Gym at 180 Middlesex Road on Saturday, March 16th, 2024, from 6:30 p.m. to 9 o'clock p.m. as presented.
Second.
We have a motion and a second. Any further discussion? All those in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Abstained? It carries 4-0-0. Discuss distribution of cannabis excise tax revenue. Is that you, Colin?
It is.
All right, take it away.
All right. As the board is well aware, in fiscal year '26, the financial implications of the new middle school project will be fully experienced. That includes a prior commitment of this board to utilize $1 million to offset the new debt, the debt of the new school from the operating budget. That will obviously have some implications that we've been hard at work with David planning for and trying to get ahead of. And David and I meet weekly, and every time I talk to him, I start with, where are we going to find the $1 million? In one of those conversations, one of the suggestions that David has was looking at how we currently dedicate the cannabis excise tax. And so 75% of that right now goes into the road stabilization fund, and the remaining 25% goes into the budget. There's a second cannabis facility coming online at some point in the upcoming fiscal year. And so we sat down and we talked with Jake, who has done a pretty thorough presentation to you about his previous projects and what's planned. And looking at what he has planned and what he's been using from road stabilization, we're confident, the three of us, that splitting that so that 50% continues to go into road stabilization and 25% goes into debt stabilization will have no impact on what we've currently been doing in roads. And the timing is great because the millionaire's tax is now in full swing. This year, the town received an additional $250,000 from the state, which kind of offsets this change if you think about it. But what it will do is it will allow us to annually put at least $250,000 into debt stabilization so that as things get more expensive, we're not relying solely on the operating budget to help with that $1 million contribution. This could potentially be used to lower that. I know that this board has placed a pretty heavy emphasis on taking care of the roads, and so that's why we've spent a lot of time with Jake looking at his historical usage of this account, how much has gone into it, how much we project to go into it, and we're very confident that making this decision will have no implication on what we're doing on the roads, but it will give us the flexibility to really be prepared for what could be some tougher budget years. This was voted in fall of 2021. However, the authorization started the following fiscal year. So it is locked in for the duration of this fiscal year and for fiscal year 2025. So if you were amenable to putting this on the warrant in May, the new change would take effect on July 1st, 2025, the start of fiscal 26. Council's looked at it. My recommendation to put it on the warrant now, even though it wouldn't start till the following fiscal year, is just because it will give us a tool that we know will become available and it'll help us plan. If that is not the will of the board or ultimately town meeting, we'll look at other avenues, obviously, to try to beef up debt stabilization, but doing it sooner than later just gives us a little bit of clarity on what we should be planning for in future years. And I included, if it was worth it, the town meeting warrant where that was authorized.
And the next time we would do it for another 3 years. We're gonna
Correct.
do it
Statutorily, you have to do it for a 3-year period.
for a 3-year period. because the only question would be, if we did it and then we sit there and say, gee, this is a little too conservative, we wouldn't be able to necessarily make an adjustment, although we could in fall town meeting change it before it takes place, but I wouldn't want to do that.
True, and hypothetically, you could also, if it was that we were too quickly filling up the state, since we have to meet the $1 million contribution anyway, we could just rely heavier in one particular year on the stabilization fund, and then redirect, if your concern was that it wasn't going to roads, redirect what we would have taken out of operating for the debt and put it into the roads. So you would have a workaround way to fix it until the 3-year period ended.
Okay. I guess I'll open it up for the rest of the board for questions. Mr. Schneider, did you want to start?
Yes, sir. And I don't disagree with what you're proposing. I guess another way to look at that, rather than have a percentage of 50, 25, 25, should it just be a dollar cap? Should you say we will first fund the road stabilization with X dollars, and anything above that goes to the operating fund and a debt stabilization? And I'm saying that because we're saying that in FY24 we're on track to get to 1.4 million in excise tax. So I'm just questioning, is there a way to do that with sort of capping a dollar number versus a percentage?
I can check with council.
Yeah, because I mean the roads, in as much as we are focusing on maintaining and improving the condition of our roads, does that need necessarily go up as quickly as the cannabis excise tax potentially goes up? Just a question.
That might even be a little bit better because you're planning for an actual dollar amount versus you don't know what the cannabis excise revenue is going to be. It's going to be a moving target. Theoretically, it's going up, but at least you're saying, if I heard you correctly, you're saying fund the roads up to X amount, and then anything over that goes to debt stabilization. Correct?
Yes. Just a thought, but you also have 25% going to the operating budget, so what happens if the excise tax doesn't meet that? We have to every year we're putting 25% in the operating budget that we're getting approved by town meeting, so.
Right.
I'd have to kind of think that one through a little bit, but I was also questioning what exactly or how exactly we're going to do all these percentages, could we also vote to do, another option, could we also vote to do 50% of the excise tax in the roads, and the other 50% is deterministic by this board to either go into stabilization or operating budget?
No, you
I'm reading a no.
You certainly, two things, back to Mr. Schneider's point, the logistic challenge to doing it that way is that we get the payments quarterly. So when the payment comes in, our treasurer's office posts based on the formula in the warrant article, 25% into this, 25. So it would become challenging if we, essentially the first 2 quarters, I guess we'd have to put 100% into. In terms of Mr. Cohane's idea, it does have to be a set percentage. And my recommendation would be to keep it the way at the 25% going into the general fund, because regardless, the balance that's not made up by debt stabilization is going to need to come out of operating for the $1 million contribution. Whereas if you put 100% of it into, or if you put, say, 50% into debt stabilization, that money is locked in there and can only be spent on the debt, if that makes sense. You give yourself a little more flexibility if you leave some in the operating budget to be used for whatever the town's budgetary needs are.
So there's an outstanding question that I've had also, I think we've discussed it before, between debt stabilization and the rainy day fund. There's 2 different funds?
Yes.
And if we put it all into rainy day, that could be either for debt or for operating? So I guess where we're trying to go to, we've always put all these different stabilization funds. Should we have one stabilization fund instead of, I don't know how many we have now, 2 or 3?
Certainly that could be a policy decision of the board. I think one of the benefits to having a separate one is that we don't ever touch general stabilization. And so my concern would be if we now, as a part of our annual planning, start taking that certain percent out of the general stabilization, it will now start going down a little bit. It'll net, right, because the money's going in. I think
it won't look as good as.
It won't
from
look
a
as good
bond
as
rating and everything else.
optics
Is
wise,
that what
yeah.
you're saying? Okay. So, let's just, Mr. Chair, I just want to
Yes.
go back to the history of this a little bit. So, this started, when we first started looking at the marijuana, act, there was a group of people that didn't want the retail marijuana. Actually, the person that was totally against it and leading the effort to kill the Marijuana Act said, I think it was at town meeting, if this does pass, I'd like to know where the money's going. And actually, that's where I got the idea of putting the road stabilization fund, was right at town meeting when he said that. So, and I've always been an advocate of, the first time this came around, I advocated for 100%. The second time it came around 3 years ago, I remember I said 100%. And one of the things that came out about that was that we might have a second marijuana retail facility coming on board. Of course, that didn't pan out. We understand that, but we put 75% because of that. Feeling pretty confident, talking with Colin or whatever, that the second marijuana facility is also going to be up and operational. Seems like they have a very good plan and the money and everything. So I just want to let the residents know, we talk about taking the excise tax and putting 50% in the roads. When that second marijuana facility comes on board, which should be in this time frame, it's not like the money for roads is going to go down. It should, I would assume it's at least going to be the same and hopefully still go up even further. Even though we're down to 50%, they still should have more money. And then as we talked about the millionaire's tax, we have an extra $200,000 coming in. At our operating budget every year, we try to put at least another $50,000 in. And this road stabilization fund that we have here, we actually have 3 road stabilization funds at this point. This one, of course, significantly is the vast majority of it, but we have other opportunities to add to the road stabilization funds that we have. So, having said all that, I'm comfortable with going to 50% of the excise tax, and if the residents kind of look at past town meetings where we do have extra funds, we also been adding 200,000 or 100,000 also with our excess funds in the roads. And with this, we can still continue to do that out of the if we have free cash, extra free cash, we've always continued to, let's put some money toward the roads that we can continue to do that. So, having said all that, I'm comfortable going to 50%. I think we have a lot of options, but I'm comfortable putting 50% in the road stabilization fund. I think it is important from the debt stabilization that we start building that up. And although every time Colin talks to David, he talks about this $1 million. About every other time I talk to Colin, I ask the same question. That's all I have for right now. And we're just starting to discuss this. There's no vote being taken tonight from what I heard, right? Okay, thank you.
I'll be brief. Yeah, honestly, as long as we've collaborated with Jake, and Jake feels like it fits into his plan, that's pretty much all I need to know. If Jake is comfortable with it and he thinks that we can afford it, I think that it's a good idea to start building up the debt stabilization. It just makes sense. So this makes sense to me. I'm in favor.
Yeah, I mean, roads is a hot button. I don't want to invest less in the roads, and I think the key is we're not going to be doing that. I think what we're doing is we're sitting there saying, look, we know we have to build up our debt stabilization, because I think even when before we did the school, we had Matt run some models in there, and there were some situations where we're like, okay, we need to make sure we have some money in stabilization, because we might have to dip into that at the beginning as if the new growth doesn't come into play, you do scenario planning, and you say, if everything goes great, we'll be all set. But if things don't, then we need to be ready for that too. So I think that this is consistent with what we've been talking about as far as, one, making sure that we have a high priority on the roads. 2, that we are putting money into stabilization accounts because we know that this money's gonna come due. I think this accomplishes that. I'm glad that Jake is continuing on with his project and his roadmap, and no pun intended, roadmap. So I think this is gonna be a good way, and I'd like to see, you know, let's run it with that in mind. We're not gonna vote on it tonight, but I think this would be part of the budget and all the warrants.
Right. Yep.
Did you need anything else from us? Just more saying, yeah, we think this is a good path to head down, give us more details, and we'll be ready when we are.
That's all, yep.
Excellent. Which dovetails into old business,
Yes.
budget fund.
All right, I will first ask David to walk through the updated trend data. You've all seen this. I shared this with the board probably 2 weeks ago now at this point. So I apologize, on the screen it's a little hard to see, it is in your packet. David's just gonna walk through where we are and some of the notes on places where may be of interest to you.
Good evening. First of all, I'm offended by old business. So first, this is going to be our third update, right, of the trend data, right? The first time that we started discussing this in November, we were looking at the first quarter, how that compared to the budget that we had created, right? And the one that we're going through currently with FY24. In January, we were at, you know, the halfway point. We had a pretty good idea of the revenue that we received for the year. It wasn't entirely complete. There's a little more red boxes in here, but now this is we're still looking at the first half. This is through the end of December 31st, okay? So why is this better than the last time we looked at it? The data's a little more complete. There's a little, you know, everything's in there that we're pretty comfortable with where we're at. When I'm going through this, I just want you to see that when we are looking at this 2024 trend data, and how we got that is, just for a reminder, I take the last 2 years and I say, where are we at with each of these revenue buckets? What percentage have we received? And then I compare that with what we have received and say, all right, well, this is how we're projecting forward, okay? Now, every time Colin and I meet and he panics about the $1 million, we don't adjust the projection for the next year. We're not that, you know, trying to be that reactionary, you know? For the most part, you're gonna see that our 2025 projection is gonna be less than what we're trending to this year. Again, we still try to stay conservative. While my model tries to alleviate any timing differences, there's certainly some. I can tell you that the canvas exercise that is trending at 350, the reason for that is because we received the second quarterly payment in December, and it generally hits in January, so that is kind of throwing it off a little bit. So it's not perfect, so that's why we try not to go over what we're trending for the next year unless we have some information, like, you know, you were talking about the L House opening up next year, so that's why you'll see that number is higher than the projection. You'll see for like more vehicle excise, even though we're trending at 2.4 million, we still have the projection for next year at a conservative 2.2 because we just don't want to each year say that we're going to get the absolute maximum that we're getting at the moment. We're looking at a PDF, but I have a live document that's, you know, that we look at week to week, and hopefully it's all good news. But again, the budget will change, the 2025 projection, but it's not so reactionary that every time we look at this that it's going to be going up and down monthly. So I'll go through real quick. The real estate and personal property, it looks like it's coming in a little short, but $315,000 is less than 1% of the taxes there, and it's not like we're going to have a deficit there. There's probably just a little bit of timing. Worst case scenario, there's tax liens that can be attached to that. I will note, tax liens themselves are not budgeted. That's why they are not in the trend data, but we do receive that revenue. So you can see that's about $100,000 the last 3 years. More vehicle excise, I just mentioned, trending a little bit higher this year. Other excise, the meals tax is is up pretty substantially. That's a good point to show that we're trending about $500,000 this year, but the projection next year is still going to be a little over 400,000. That's just a good point, a good data point showing that we still try to stay conservative and not just maybe we had a good half. Canvas excise, I just mentioned, just that timing, that payment in December instead of January has kind of got it inflated a little bit. I know that we've had discussions with the board about how much we actually want to increase that with the new establishment coming on board. We're certainly amenable to that. Canvas impact fee, we still have this on here from past things, but we know that there's not going to be any funds there. The fees, we kind of, it's trending downwards. The fees include a lot, we just sent out some excise bills. I'm sure everybody's starting to see those in the mail. There's some income and tax fees that are going to be attached to that will boost this up a little bit. You can see that we have next year that at 75,000, it's scaling down over the last couple of years, and we just want to adjust accordingly. Licenses and permits. This is another one of those good data points that shows, hey, we're projecting 820,000, right? We increased our rates. The permits did themselves before the increase that the town's doing. There was an initial increase, and at the last meeting, we voted for another increase, but we still didn't, bump that up too much because we just want to see how it fleshes out first, The other department revenue, while it's trending high right now, we have a lot of departments, and sometimes that can tend to fluctuate as well. Fines and forfeitures, this is a lot to do with like more vehicle fines and stuff like that. You can see we're budgeting a little lower than we did going into this year. It's not a huge dollar amount, but we'll kind of adjust accordingly. Going down a little bit, cemetery revenue, again, it's 2,000 down, so while Colin puts a big red box, it's not going to hurt too much. If you look at, in total, the variance is $100,000, which means we're pretty much perfect at how we project revenue, which is not going to be how it fleshes out. It's just that we update this accordingly. So I guess that's really it. Again, this is a live model. Colin and I look at it weekly. We discuss what we can do projecting forward, but we try not to be too reactionary. I'm sure there will be a lot of changes when we add in January, and then we'll keep updating it until we approve that final budget there in April and then on the town meeting warrant.
All right. Questions? Mr. Schneider, did you want to jump in?
No, I mean, it sounds like, 90% good news, right? Everything is trending in the right direction. Without putting words in your mouth or whatever, but are you seeing anything sort of over the short horizon which might impact any of these numbers? Is there any blips that you're seeing in January or in February that though this has taken us through, the halfway point, that would sort of impact that?
One thing that will, the rates, David talked about the rates that were increased. You increased building permit rates.
Yeah.
That vote was effective March 1st. Toll Brothers is now at a point where I think we're going to start seeing much more rapid building permits. And on the 11th, we'll ask you to accept the open space deed, which will help them get more occupancy permits. It's all tied. So that fees, the licenses and permits number will have kind of that artificial bump at the end of this fiscal year. But still, to be conservative, and because Toll Brothers is really the big project we're banking on, we didn't want to incorporate all of that increase in our forecasted revenue. Aside from that, I don't think we're looking at any, for the remainder of this fiscal year, any surprises that we're not thinking about.
And I think you were thinking of the negative ones versus the if.
I only want to present positive
Exactly.
information, sorry.
You know, if
Yeah,
you get
no,
more, then that's fine. It's more, anything that could possibly be, negative.
Right, negative since this end of December.
Right.
You know, anything that's happened in January, anything that's happened in the first 3 weeks of February that concern us, but I'm hearing no.
Negative.
Good, right answer.
Thank you.
Mr. Cohen?
I like that answer too. Just on the cherry sheet, how comfortable are, you know, I know the state is still finalizing. I'm not sure if this was the same number as it was last time of what we're expecting or projection for 2025, but looking at it, it looks like it's going down a little bit from the 2024 budget. What is that about? So how comfortable are we with that, knowing that the state hasn't finalized this and whatever, and what have we seen from trends previously and what you expect for this year?
I would say that we're not really much further along than when I first presented the cherry sheet, except for to say that the governor has a statewide constituency, so she doesn't really have a particular interest in helping individual communities. Where we see a positive change is when the House and the Senate start to look at it. So I certainly don't expect that we'll see a dramatic decrease. But on the legislative side, those are folks that have a direct interest, politically, if you will, to be direct. So I expect it to land in the same area.
Excuse me, if you remember last year, we did a study to try to see where their preliminary numbers would be with how it ended, right? Kind of answering your question in advance here. And there's really, from the beginning to the end, was about 1%, 2%, up or down. There was the plus minus to it, but it really wasn't, there was no substantial changes on the preliminary. I'd be happy to show you that too if you want to see it.
1% on $9 million is a lot of money, though. So just so everybody's aware, so.
Yeah, it was better last year.
It was
They
better.
didn't, but it wasn't enough to, it wasn't like we said, oh, we're gonna have a ton more free cash. It was more,
Yeah.
okay, it wasn't as ugly as we had thought.
Yep.
I think was probably what it was.
Thank you.
Okay. Select Person Kalavokis, anything?
No, it's making sense to me. Thank you very much, David.
So, one, I appreciate we have the variance, we got the reds and the greens, and there's notes in there. This is what we asked for. I think this helps us as we go through this process to see it this way, because, I mean, if you know what questions we're gonna ask, it's a lot easier on you. We can sit there and say, this is a good way to go moving forward. It does give us, again, it's not exact, it's trends, but it does give us kind of an idea, and then you can give us your interpretations of any potential deviations that might be there. I do appreciate that it's conservative, because I think we have to be, right? But this is good, and I think this is, we're getting there. We're getting there, and I think you have some other stuff on the budget that you're now gonna take us through that take it down a little bit further.
Absolutely.
So thank you.
All right, so I want to provide a quick update on where the budget stands today based on, or given that it's been about a month since we presented the initial budget. I'm not gonna reread this slide. This is the same one that was in your first presentation. But I did want to highlight some additional positive news. You'll see that since we presented the first budget, some of the things that we were still waiting on have ironed out, and so my new recommended budget proposal is about $320,000 less than what I first was recommending. There are still some things to shake out, but I think at this point we figured out the biggest items. And so just in general, I think last time I was here, we were looking at a 3.7% increase over FY25. That's down to 3.1%. Or in dollars, it's 1.4 million. So a couple changes here. We had been going into this on the assumption that the school's budget would be a 2.7% increase over their fiscal 24 budget, which is what we agreed on. We met with the administration for the first time last week to review their budget. They presented a 2.7% increase to the penny. So we appreciate their collaboration. We've always had a good working relationship with them, and they've been a great partner on coming together on a budget that is necessary. There are still some things on their side that are gonna flush out, but they have contingencies for if they have to, make some changes to accommodate those final things. We received a substantially lower estimate than we expected from Greater Lowell Technical High School. They haven't voted to approve their budget, so in full disclaimer, it is just their original estimate at this point. But that number is based on enrollment data, which doesn't change based on a vote. So we shouldn't see any surprises there. Our health insurance increases, we always budget for the worst. When we start the budget planning, our health insurance company tells us to plan for 10%. That's what we do. We're now looking at increase of about 5%, which is substantially lower than communities that stayed with our old insurance company, which we switched probably about 4 years ago. We saw savings when we came to this plan, and we've been seeing those savings since. So this is that 5% increase is good, not just for our budget, for also our employees as well in their share of the bill. We've settled one union contract, which is great. There's still some remaining, and so that's part of the things that will shake out. But again, we included in the budget an assumption of a 2.5% increase in fiscal '25. So if there's a minor variance, it won't be a huge change. If you are looking at the detailed budget and what's changed, one of the things we did as we look at the structure of the DPW once that act is approved, currently we have custodial positions paid out of individual department budgets, even though all of their payroll goes through the highway department. Their supervisors are in the highway department. So in my fiscal '25 budget, we've consolidated those. So it does look like the highway budget is higher than before, but it's because we took it, 10 hours were paid out of the Council on Aging budget, 19 hours were paid out of the police budget. We just put everybody that's paid from the highway, in the highway union, in the highways budget. And organizationally, that makes sense for what we're doing. It's the highway admin that's doing their payroll anyway. One other key change here is we're very actively looking at, the police department has had a contract for custodial services, and it's at a point where we can hire our own staff to perform that. So that has come out of the police department's budget and into highway. So again, it looks like highways has gone dramatically higher, but it's just because we've reorganized. All right, any questions on changes before I get to Mr. Eldridge's favorite part of this presentation?
Pie chart, is it the pie chart? Yeah.
Yes.
Okay, good. Been waiting for this.
So one of the very valid points that Mr. Eldridge has asked us to do is show people where their tax dollars go. And so what we've done is broken down the budget as best as we can to show people exactly where all of the tax dollars go. And so what that looks like is we've divided salaries, the expenses, health insurance. A key note, we haven't done open enrollment yet, so this is based on FY24 enrollment. It may change slightly, but the percentages should stay the same. We broke down retirement. One important note is that teachers in Massachusetts are on the state retirement system, so it will look like general government and public safety and public works department, like their retirement is much, much higher, but it's because a big chunk of the school staff is not in our retirement system. And then there are other things that we did our best to evenly split. That includes property insurance, liability insurance, workers' comp, life insurance, and Medicare. For things that aren't tied to specific employees, we took the percent of the budget that category represented, and we divided the costs evenly. Where there's a staff component, we took the percent of staff in that department, and that's how we divided the cost. So it's not 100% accurate, but it gives you a really good idea of where things fall. And then there's two unique insurance policies. Police and fire each have their own accident liability insurance, so those are both in the public safety category. So these are your major categories: general government, land use and community development, public works, public safety, health and human services, education, and debt. General government is kind of like the front-facing but also behind-the-scenes departments. Most of the departments here house the town hall. The list is up here, I won't go through it. It does include all of our intergovernmental assessments, which is largely NIMCOG and some of the regional shared services, and it also includes the library. These are the core functions, many of which other buckets rely on for things like payroll, expenses, etc. On the general government side, this is the breakdown. You can see that it represents 7.6% of the town's overall fiscal '25 budget. It includes 21.5 full-time employee equivalents, and that represents 6.47% of our workforce. Land use and community development is a smaller group, but that's our building department, conservation, planning, and zoning board of appeals. Those are the ones that are largely behind the beginning stages of development in town, permitting and land use regulations. Only 6 full-time employees in this bucket, representing 1.8% of our workforce. Their budget totals $606,000, which is 1.28%. One thing I want to note is that these are based on fiscal '25 numbers, but we haven't done anything drastic to change the way we're funding departments. So if we ran an analysis of 23, 24, 22, it would all be largely the same breakdown. In Public Works, Forestry, Highway Department, Vehicle Maintenance, Engineering, Snow and Ice, Cemetery, Stormwater, Street Lighting, and Public Buildings. These are physical assets, obviously buildings, roads. These are the people that are out doing the work to keep our infrastructure moving. This includes 12.75 full-time employee equivalents. That's about 3.8% of our workforce. And the operating budget, the percentage of the operating budget is 5.11. Public safety is a relatively obvious one. It also includes animal control, which is a shared service with Chelmsford, emergency management, which is housed under the fire department. And you'll note that for the last 3 years now, our budget breaks out school resource officers separately from the police department, but all of those are encompassed in this category. In terms of workforce, excluding schools, this is our largest workforce, 13.39% with 44.5 FTEs. Their budget represents 15.1% of the operating budget, and in total it's $7.1 million. Again, there are other categories higher because they have the 2 unique insurance policies. Health and Human Services, these are departments that provide human services to the community, promote public health, and engage the community in recreation and community building. So Memorial Day Committee, waste collection, which has historically in Tyngsborough been managed by the Board of Health, the Board of Health, Council on Aging, Recreation, and our Veterans Agent. They have 7.25 FTEs, which represents almost 2% of our workforce, with a total budget of $2.3 million, largely because of our waste contract being in this category, and that represents just shy of 5% of the operating budget. Education, obviously the Tyngsborough Public Schools, and we included Greater Lowell Tech in here because that is a pretty big assessment for education. But when we look at the next slide, all of the full-time employees are on our payroll in the Tyngsborough Public Schools. Obviously, this is the largest chunk of where our operating budget goes, 64% of it, totaling $30.3 million. There are 240.3 FTEs. Again, that's all of the Tyngsborough Public Schools, and that represents 72% of the town's workforce. And we had in our first budget presentation, we showed the breakdown of health insurance. This is putting it in dollar form. Now, one thing that you will notice before we go to the debt, obviously, this was a breakdown of the operating budget, so none of our enterprise fund departments were included in there, so media, sewer, and ambulance are not included in this breakdown. For debt, you can see that in fiscal '25, we have $321,787 in exempt debt. That's the remaining payments for the elementary school and the high school roof and boiler replacement. We're in the final year in fiscal '25 of those payments. And then non-exempt is a mix of capital projects totaling $564,000. I think the final one of those is paid off in fiscal year 2027. And our recommended capital plan this year doesn't include any new borrowing. So now the visuals that Eric has been looking for. And we will find a way to incorporate these into a more comprehensive budget book than what we've typically provided ahead of town meeting. But you can see here, this is a breakdown of the operating budget. These are just the categories we've talked about, with education being the largest. Our smallest one is the land use and community development, although I will say that, of course, they play a huge role in town that you can't quantify on this pie chart, and debt represents another small portion of that. And we also just wanted to show where our staff work. Again, 72% of our staff work in education at the Tyngsborough Public Schools, and then the remaining pie chart sections almost very closely tied to what they represent in terms of the operating budget as well. So we'll make these visuals specifically available on our website probably tomorrow and our social media, just so people can see as we go through this iterative process with the fiscal '25 budget, what it actually shakes down to, and put it into slightly more interesting ways of reading it. But that's all I have on a budget update for fiscal '25.
So, I told Colin I was thrilled because I
He
had to
was
use.
thrilled.
had to
I
use-
haven't been thrilled recently, but he was thrilled.
And this is what I was looking for, really, to I think it's important for residents to be able to quickly see, where's the money being spent, right? And then I think we do this, we can do the same thing for revenue that's coming in, to sit there and say, where does it go? And people need to understand it. I like how this is laid out. I like how you broke it out by group. Doesn't have to be perfect, right? I know that there's accounting things that'll make something off there, but we at least get a feel that this is where things are. And I think this is what's important for residents to know. They need to know, hey, when I sign that check and I make my payment, where's it going? And I think this helps with that. And I think that, it's a good starting point. I think that there's more things that people are gonna wanna understand. And I think that that's our job, is to help them understand that, so that they feel comfortable that their money is being spent wisely. So I appreciate the work on this one. I told Colin, I said, I'm thrilled. I go, I finally got it. This is what we're looking for. So, thank you for doing that. Now I'll open up to the rest of the board for questions and comments.
We're looking for, you were looking for it.
I know that I was hounding Matt going back, this goes back
No.
years, I was hounding him.
It does give you a bit different perspective, and it's good to be able to look at this. The one thing that, we've been really good at is not adding a lot of debt. And if you go to page 21, the slides, when we were working with, I forgot what group it was, they said, this is all the debt you have? This is it? I mean, this is historically very, very, very low. And as you said, the exempt debt is coming off, it's the final year, and the other debt is 2027. So, we've kept the debt low. We knew at some point the big capital projects were coming, and so we tried to be very frugal when it came to not borrowing money and trying not to borrow money. And as you said, we're not borrowing money again this year. Even though we made significant investments in our capital, we've still kept the debt down. We've done it through free cash and other mechanisms. So,
ARPA.
So thank you very much. I think this adds a lot, and as much as I kid Eric about the pie charts, I think they look very nice.
Mr. Schneider.
I have no comment. That's a great presentation, really. There's a lot of information there to digest.
Yeah.
Select Person Calabocas.
I don't know how anybody could have questions. A great breakdown to a great level of detail. I understand it. I agree. I like the project.
Excellent, yeah, no, and I think, be interesting to see what the residents think. So if people have, as they look at some of this info, I think between what we've got in the new annual report and what we're gonna put out there in the budget book, I'd be interested to hear what residents, what questions do they have? I know, we hear them, but it's like, okay, what are the really important questions that people wanna know? And, I think to increase our communications and help with transparency, we can try to figure, I think this is a great starting point for that, so I appreciate the efforts. Anything else, budget-wise?
That is all that I have.
Awesome, well, I appreciate the update. So I guess I'm gonna ask, because there's someone in the audience, and we had some citizens' time earlier. I didn't know whether anybody had an objection I didn't know whether, Mr. Martin, you wanted to address the board for a few minutes. And you can sit down here if you'd like.
Oh, this is fine, I'm gonna be brief. Thank you for the opportunity to let me speak.
The mic isn't working there, I guess, so.
Would you rather me sit right
Yeah, come down to here.
Yeah, thank you.
And we know that, just so folks know that personnel thing and all that.
So, thank you for allowing me to speak. I know you heard from my friends earlier tonight, but I just wanted to, on behalf of the Tyngsborough Housing Authority Board of Commissioners, to come here and apologize to you folks to having to be dragged into a situation going on at the Tyngsborough Housing Authority. And that's, I'll reserve all my other comments for a later time. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thank you, Brian.
Okay, so, Before we go into executive session, I will open it up for select board reports. Did you want to start us off, Mr. Schneider?
Yes, I do. So this is election time, election season. There's lots of ways to vote. We have early voting, we have mail-in voting, we have live voting, as Colin had mentioned in his report. One thing that dismays me just a little bit is, in speaking to the town clerk, she mailed out, at the request of the voters, about 1,500 ballots, and only a small fraction of those have come back. So that to me is a little bit disappointing, that people have ballots, they're sitting on their kitchen tables, and yet they haven't mailed them back in yet. There's a cost to the town of doing that. There's a cost to mail them out, and they're all prepaid. The postage is prepaid to bring them back. So we are incurring a cost when people ask for mail-in ballots, and I would encourage you, if you're requesting a mail-in ballot, fill it out and send it back. Thank you.
Mr. Colleen.
Thank you. We're talking about the marijuana excise tax. Colin put the special town meeting warrant in the packet. And having read through that, I kind of want to just go through that a little bit. It brought back a lot of memories of that particular town meeting. What I really wanted to do is talk about the impact of what that meeting really had on this community. And I also want to thank all the residents that participated, in the town meeting. But when you really looked at that, there wasn't even 10 warrant articles, but there were some very high impact ones. We already talked about the marijuana excise tax. When that's in full force, it still has a little while to go. We expect over $3 million will have been put into the roads through that one piece of legislation that we passed. That's a huge impact, the biggest problem that our residents have clearly told us all the time, and that could be up to $3 million, maybe even more, that goes directly into our roads because of that. Another one, we talked about town elections. We're going to have early voting in town elections. That was passed at that particular meeting, and no excuse absentee balloting. When I was working, I used to go in Monday mornings, and sometimes I would have to fly out that night or the very next morning, most of the time that night for an emergency. And if we had early voting, that would have been perfect for me because I missed town elections because of that. We changed from selectmen to a select board, which is something that almost all communities around us have done, which not a huge impact, but something that we needed to get done. That particular meeting, we actually allowed breweries in town. Now we have 2 breweries in town, so a big impact for us beer drinkers. And to me, one of the biggest things that we did was Town Manager Act. This is something that many ex-selectmen, talked about, is we needed the town manager. The ones that came into town meeting to talk about it said they wanted a town manager. And what that really did to the residents, we were trying to tell the residents at that time, you still can go to the select board, you still can go to the town manager, it's not really going to change from your perspective. And I've talked to multiple people. I haven't heard a single complaint since we've gone to the Town Manager Act. But internally, it has a huge impact, and that's the key here, right? There was too much interference in day-to-day operations. There's too much interference in personnel issues, and it caused immense issues. And this one act, to me, resolved all of the biggest issues that I saw in the previous 3 to 4 years was resolved by this one act. And this is the one that's going to live, in this town. It is just, it's helped the organization, and when it comes to efficiencies, it's hard to explain how much more efficient this is. When Colin came on board, I can't imagine if he's a town administrator having to ask for permission to basically tie his shoes and to go to the bathroom. That's really basically what it was about. You had to ask the select board for everything. So now that you don't have to do that, it's just been a huge impact. All you have to do is look at the agendas that we put together here. Before the Town Manager Act, they were 3 times the size of this. We had to vote on every little thing that the town administrator did. Now, new business, we have 4 items, and it gives us a lot more time to work on policy, to discuss policy, to talk about different options of this policy before we actually enact it. So I just want to take a moment to thank all the residents who were at that meeting. And I really want to show also what a big impact you have, because, you know, we propose stuff, but, you know, we're only one vote at town meeting. You're one vote, and we're one vote. And we just can't thank you enough for supporting at town meeting, and just look at the huge impact that it has. And moving forward, every town meeting has an impact. So please stay involved. Look at committees and whatever that you might be able to join. You know, just coming to town meeting. Any suggestions you have for us to improve the information that you get? We've done a lot of work of putting every article. So any article you have a question of, you can look at the article. Sometimes we have videos and everything else. So any other suggestions you have? Hopefully a lot of you made New Year's resolutions to go to town meeting in the future to make a huge impact on your community. And when it comes to, you know, when it comes to this community, you have the most impact on the local community here, right? So you can make the decisions of what you want. We've talked about roads, and one of the things that we did at this particular meeting was, you know, we added $3 million to the roads, right? That's something that people have wanted for a long time, and we were able to do that with your help. So please stay involved, and appreciate all your support to this time. Thank you.
Thank you. Select Person Kalabokis.
What a busy night for select board member reports.
I guess so.
Select board member Cohen's report regarding impact, town elections, and all of that good stuff is a great segue for my report tonight. I wanted to take a moment tonight just to thank everyone who I have worked with, both in and outside of town hall, for their dedication to the town and all of their hard work. I believe that we do truly live in an exceptional town that has exceptional people supporting it. Serving on the board has been a truly rewarding experience, and I'm grateful for all the people I have met and the opportunity I have had to represent our community. As some of you know, I've had some big changes in my personal life over the past year. I've gotten married, my business has been growing, and after careful consideration, I have decided that I will not run for re-election this upcoming term. I simply don't have enough time to dedicate to the position as I do now. Even though I won't be a select board member anymore, I will still be volunteering around town, and my door will always be open for anyone who may need it. And I'm confident that the next member of the select board will bring fresh perspectives and ideas to the table. And I wish all of the candidates the best of luck in the upcoming election.
Well, thank you.
Your turn.
I'm good. So, kind of dovetailing on to that, there's been a lot that's happened over 3 years, and it's surprising when we look back on a lot of it. I know that some folks might be disappointed because I do still have the time to put in, and I will be running again. I have submitted my papers, so I will continue to work for the town and the residents. It has been a lot of work, but I think it's very rewarding. And I think that, people ask me, oh, do you like it? And I'm like, I don't know if I like it, but I think it's important. And I think it's one of those things. There are some great people that we get to work with, and I think that trying to help people out, I think that's ultimately what my goal is. I don't have any special interests in town. I don't have business in town. I'm here for the community, so I will continue to do that. I will miss my colleague because we came in at the same time, and we kind of learned as we were going through some of this stuff. But I think we accomplished a bunch of things, and I look forward to hopefully spending another 3 years working on this. So that's my report. So with that, I guess I'm going to entertain a motion to go into executive session.
I move that the select board move into executive session pursuant to Exemption 3, to discuss strategy with respect to collective bargaining or litigation if an open meeting may have a detrimental effect on the bargaining or litigating position of the public body and the chair so declares. DWSD System Development Fee and Road Impact Fee and 10 Merrimack Way, Unit C, Affordable Unit Foreclosure. Exemption 6, to consider the purchase, exchange, lease, or value of real property if the chair declares that an open meeting may have a detrimental effect on the negotiation position of the public body, 10 Merrimack Way, Unit C. Exemption 3, to discuss strategy with respect to collective bargaining or litigation if an open meeting may have a detrimental effect on the bargaining or litigating position of the public body, and the chair so declares all collective bargaining units. And Exemption 2, to conduct strategy sessions in preparation for negotiations with non-union personnel, all non-union positions.
I will second that.
I have a motion and a second. Any further discussion? Roll call vote. Mr. Schneider?
In favor.
In favor.
In favor.
I am also in favor. That carries 4-0-0. Thank you, everyone. Our next meeting is March 11th. Have a great evening.
Good night, everybody.
Good night.